this is Mike Byrnes with another episode of Business Bests. Hopefully this advice has been helping your business. I really appreciate you investing time to listen to me. Hopefully it's insightful. I've talked about business planning. Consultants love planning, so that's a big part of what we do. And part of that is, I had said earlier, I love the quote, begin with the end in mind. And so part of that is related to succession planning and knowing what your exit strategy is. Really got to do a deep dive and look at what motivates you earlier on when you start a business. Do you just love what you do? Are you doing it to make money? Are you doing it for your family? Obviously making money to support your family. Or are you trying to do it to maybe bring your family into the business at some point, and then they have a way to have income and revenue throughout their lifetime? There's a lot of family dynamics in certain businesses. What does that look like? Are you doing this to leave a legacy? Do you want to create something that will live beyond you? Or are you just trying to get the biggest paycheck you can? Do you do this just to help your clients? Are you just going to always help them until the very last breath you have? Or are you going to try to go live on the beach or travel the world or become a volunteer executive at a nonprofit or whatever it might be? There's all different types of things that can factor into your exit strategy. One thing I will say is, if you're younger and you're looking 30 years out, it can change. There's a lot we don't know, and the industries will change, and people will change, and the business will change. So it doesn't have to be permanent, but I would say you have to kind of have that vision of what you're trying to attain. If you don't, you're just going to stumble across, right? Like a ship in the wind, like a sailboat, just kind of being blown around, whatever wind comes up or whatever storm pushes you in a certain direction. I had used previously the analogy of when you have a business, having the end in mind is like when they laid the railroads. They didn't just kind of put the tracks down and then hope they got somewhere. Like, they really had a vision of where they wanted to go, and then they had the railroad tracks get them there. So I would actually really invest time, if you haven't done so already, to figure out what that looks like and where you're going to go. From a succession standpoint, I work with a lot of financial planners, and they're planners by profession, and it's amazing how many of them don't have a really good plan. It's the old cobbler's kids have no shoes. If I asked my kids what a cobbler was, I don't think they would know. Not a lot of cobblers around anymore, but really, why do you not have a plan? Is it all in your head, etc.? So here's the risk, and I use this analogy with my clients, or I take them through this scenario. I've heard speakers say before, well, what if you got hit by the bus tomorrow? Sorry, bad visual. But I go a little bit scarier and say, sorry, you're already dead. Tomorrow, what happens? And so could the employees or associates in your organization show up and open the door? Could they get all the passwords, log into every system? What things would they not know? What would they not have access to? What documents do they need to know? What training do they need to know? There's so much that we can just assume that people know. I almost kind of need like a dress rehearsal. I remember I grew up in the Midwest, and we'd have like a tornado warning, and we went through like that alert and whatever. Like, what would happen if somebody in your organization passed away? Could you ever test this? One thing to think about too is, what would the communications be like? It's pretty morbid to have a demise letter, but that can prepare people. The next in command should kind of know what that communication would look like. Are they on board with what that communication would look like in the future of your organization? Have you trained them? Have you got them on board? There's a whole bunch that you need to do to think about how to prepare for those sudden illnesses, etc. You might, if you get sick, might have time to get people up to speed and do the things that you need to do. But the reality is you could just be gone. And so if you care about your business, care about your staff, care about your the employees, care about those clients, strategic alliances, even your family, you really got to take the time to think about this. And sometimes it feels like it's a mountain too big to climb, right? And so people don't get to take that first step. Other times they just think they're going to live forever. Like, I'm healthy, I'm young, I'm not going to ever have to deal with this. But unfortunately, people pass away all the time, or people get seriously ill, and they just weren't prepared because they didn't think they ever had to be. One of the things that is really, really sad when you don't have a succession plan and it's not kind of tested is that your family members have to step in and maybe sell your organization for you. What a horrible thing to do. Like, if you love your loved ones and you don't have any plan at all and nothing's in place, just think about it. If they love you too, they're going to be deeply sad and maybe in a depressed state. And then they have to sell a business that they know nothing about, and they have to do it in a pretty timely manner. If your clients are seeing that there's no plan and that they have to kind of look out for themselves, they're not going to stick with your business forever, right? They're going to transition to somewhere else. And so not only is your spouse, let's say it's your spouse that is selling your business, depressed, not know the industry, not able to even think and process this stuff, but now on top of maybe getting the funeral arrangements and other things in place, they have to figure out how to sell a business, and they have to do it in a really timely manner, because as soon as those clients find out, they're not going to have the longest patience to deal with what those next steps are. So think about who's going to motivate you to do this, because sometimes people just aren't ready to do this type of succession planning, to get themselves out of their comfort zone. We all have these day-to-day responsibilities. We get pulled in 100 different directions. I feel like mankind and as a whole is just busier than we've ever been before. And I don't think that's going to slow down in the near future. So how do you make time for this? Using a third party, I'm a consultant, obviously, like toot my own horn or not, pat myself on the back. That's one way to do it. Have some accountability partners, other people like you, other businesses, maybe going through the same thing. Create a little study group and think about how you can share ideas, network, motivate each other, encourage each other, whatever word you want to use to take those steps that you need to take to get to where you need to go. So one, it's just comforting. You can sleep at night for yourself. It's in your own best interest to do this. Especially if you want to leave a legacy, know that your loved ones are going to be taken care of. And even if you have some philanthropic concerns or some things that you really care about, this is something that you might want to do this planning just to be able to get the money at the exit strategy time to help support that charity. So one, it's for you. Two, it's your family, whether it's your spouse or your kids or grandkids, whatever it might be. You'll be doing them a real service, and we'll talk about a little bit more. Your clients, I hate to see like clients go through issues that they don't have to go through, and if you care about them, you feel the same way. Staff is a big one. You might lose staff too, just like you might lose clients. If they don't think that something is in place, guess what? They're going to try to network as fast as they can. They're not going to stay on a sinking ship forever, right? So if they see that they think that it's starting to take on water, or the bow is heading in because the leadership's gone, they might jump ship and go somewhere else. So that's another reason. Strategic alliances are another one to think about too. If you had a really good lead exchange kind of thing, and we've talked about that in other videos, but if you have that really tight relationship, guess what? When they lose their main contact, they might be gone too. They might go look to replace it, and they might, even if you have an exit strategy and you have a successor internally or whatever it might be, they might go and start a new relationship too. So there should be a communication strategy with all of these people, and even a prospect. If you have a really good prospect and they're in the pipeline, they find this news out, you might just have lost them forever, right? So that team approach can work with strategic alliances and with, obviously, with prospects too, so you don't lose them completely. Let's talk about the grieving spouse scenario. It is one that, it's terrible. I've seen it happen, and actually as a consultant tried to step them through the process, and it's not good. Trust me, you really don't want to do that to your spouse. And so what happens in that case, it's almost always a fire sale. So meaning they're not going to get top dollar on the sale of your business. Even if you have a successor built in, but you don't have the legalese, you don't have the paperwork, the structure of it all, they can actually get a really good deal out of this. And so that's really, if you're trying to have an extra strategy that is going to support your family, you kind of just hurt them. I like to use a scenario if you're selling your house. If I had to list my house right now and sell it within a week, I'm just making up a number, it is not prepared to show. Like, I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, and at times I feel like I'm a hoarder. It's a summer project of mine. I already started, like, cleaning out the basement. Just so much stuff gets accumulated. My garage, same thing. I live on the baseball field and softball field. I'm a coach, so I just day to day, like, my house is sometimes in disarray. Try to keep certain rooms that we're in a lot, those active rooms, clean. But your business is kind of the same way, right? So I use that scenario of, like, if I knew I was going to sell my house, oh, by the way, I would get rid of the clutter, I would paint certain rooms, I would get a handyman to fix the 50 things that are broken. There's always something that starts to fall apart. Rather than my pace of fixing those things, I could get more help to get it done faster. I'd make the yard better. So you get the scenario, right? Like, I would spend time to sell my house. So now go back to your business. There are a lot of things that you can do within your own business to actually increase its value. And maybe I'll do a whole video on that, like, what are those bells and whistles and different levers and things that you can do to increase the value of your organization or your firm if you're trying to sell it. But just know that that's the case. So if you're trying to avoid the fire sale, actually having these things in plan, the more that you do this, the better you're off. Planning can be really interactive, and it can help in a whole bunch of different ways. Just going through the process of, like, what would the valuation be and how do I get there? If you bring in a third party to do valuations, for example, they'll even tell you, like, how could you improve your business to make it better? So, for example, financial advisors, one little lever is, what's the average age of your clients? And so if your clients are really wealthy, that's great. If they're older versus younger, which one's worth more? I mean, obviously, if you have a really good retention rate, the life value of a younger client is worth more to the business than an older client, right? Because one, you'll be able to hopefully retain them and have that revenue year after year after year after year, if not decades. But also, if the older client dies, you don't necessarily get the money. When the money passes to the next generation, you don't always capture it. So things to think about, those levers, and how could you make your business be ready to be sold in case of something bad happening. A hurdle I've seen too with the spouse trying to sell the business, they can't really make business decisions if they're not in the firm. And so what does that look like? How does the legal part of it work? You would love for the spouse to say, hey, here's the plan. If the spouse is going to take it over or going to sell it, here's what it looks like. Here, this goes out to all clients. But they might not legally be able to do that, right? So how is your corporate structure set up? Who would need to make that communication? What would it say? What would it look like? Who are all the people that should be involved? Like a demise letter type of thing, you should probably know who that next chain of command is. Hopefully you know that. But do they know it? I've actually seen scenarios where people start to fight when something bad happens. If the owner passes away, it's just like a struggle. If you're a financial planner, you've seen this with estate planning, right? If the parents died and the kids don't know what's going on, it's sad. They could fight over stupid candlesticks and never talk to each other again, right? Like they fight over stupid stuff when the estate's getting split up. I don't mean to say stupid, but like to them it means more than the parents would have wanted it to mean. Now back to the business scenario, same thing can happen. Like people struggle of who would have what responsibility, what the compensation would be like, what's the ownership, blah, 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 blah. You get it. If you're not prepared, you're setting up your organization to fail because there could be a lot of conflicts and they might not have your vision of what it looks like. And so if you've not communicated it and shared it and actually had them have some buy-in, it's going to be a loss. There's a good chance that the business will fail. All right, what's the exit strategy look like? It might be oversimplified, but there's kind of 4 categories of what it could look like. You have an internal successor or successor team, partners. You have a firm that is a roll-up, consolidator, tuck-in type of firm. There's all kinds of names for it. And you can just sell outright to them. You can merge with another organization. So there are a couple scenarios in both of those, 2 and 3. I'll talk about in a second. And the 4th category is just forget it. I'll be gone. I don't need to worry about it. And I would say, I see probably a third of the business owners that I work with are actually struggling with this. So if you ask them if they have a plan, they might say yes. If you ask them 5 questions about it, you'll see that there's so many holes in their plans, or it's not signed off on, or it's not legally approved, or whatever it might be. That's a real issue. So 4 categories. We'll spend more time on the internal succession plan. But I will say, sometimes to get top dollar is to sell externally, right? But you might actually want to think more about your staff or your clients. So if you sell outright to someone else, they are completely in charge. Obviously, they want to retain the clients, so they don't want to shake up those relationships too much. But if they didn't believe in the philosophy or your process or your service model, they don't have to replicate that, right? So you might actually be selling to someone that's actually going to hurt your clients, right? And they're going to be upset about it. And I have seen that happen before. The person that acquired the firm in these different scenarios, whether it was planned or not planned, they just weren't a match, and it just kind of failed. So maybe some of the clients stay, but not 90% plus of the clients staying. That's kind of a number that you really want to ballpark for, is what's the retention look like in these different scenarios, because that is going to factor in and who's going to get compensated and what. So think about, what does your plan look like? If you're in the 4th category, why are you doing that? We'll talk about that more in a moment. But that 4th category is, I just don't have a plan, and I'm not going to have a plan. I'm not going to do it now. That's where I would use the scenario in your own head, go back and say, all right, you just passed away yesterday. What happens today? And try to figure out what that looks like. It's not necessarily like It's a Wonderful Life when everything is rosy and everything pans out great in the movie. I don't mean to be laughing because we're talking about what your death would look like, but really, you want to figure it out so that things will head in the right direction, not the wrong direction. All right, so let's talk about picking a successor. Option number 1 was trying to find the internal person or team that would take over. What are your plans there? One thing that I find out or I uncover is that the owner wants to find a mini-me. And they are so selective and so picky because they can't find anybody that's like them. And that is probably the case. We're all individual people, and there's probably no one person that is a complete match, right? And so what does that look like? If you're going with the mini-me strategy, what are those things that you have to have and some of those things that you don't have to have? And does the mini-me strategy work for the next generation of ownership? Because you were really great at X, Y, and Z. Let's say you had the best drive and you were the best at sales. You maybe need someone that's more about corporate culture and organization, and you might not need someone that's a mini-me to have your firm live on, 1, but 2, be more successful in the future. So that's number 1. The second challenge is there a shortfall in the industry of people coming up that could be talented to take on what you're trying to do? I would encourage you to always be networking with this, and that's why it's so important to have your exit strategy figured out earlier on, because you can plan for this and you can be active. Let's just say, I'm going to use rough numbers. You sell your business for $1 million. And if you didn't sell it in a well-planned out way, it would get $750,000. So that's a $250,000 difference, just to use round numbers. could some of that money be used to attract the right staff? So where it feels like a loss in the short term, you're actually helping your organization in the long term. You're investing in it. And that's where it shouldn't necessarily be looked at a cost. Recruiting, you can waste a lot of money on recruiting. Human capital is usually one of the number one expenses, if not the number one expense in an organization. And recruiting and all that is part of that cost. And you have to figure out, is it a cost or is it an investment for the future? Probably the third issue I've found with owners not wanting to have that next generation leadership to take over the firm is that they just kind of think that the next generation has a silver spoon in their mouth. They don't have the work ethic, whatever it might be. And I can tell you there's some truth based on facts and different studies of how people want to work. For example, the next generation, the younger generation doesn't want to come in an office anymore. They don't want to wear a tie, or females don't want to wear a suit. And there's differences that the older generation perceive. Some are real, that they don't necessarily have the drive. They don't want to work the same amount of hours. They're too distracted, pulled in different directions. Like the phone is a perfect example. Like you could see an older person seeing a younger person constantly on their phone. It could work the other way around too, but just so distracted and not taking the time they need to do to become better at possibly owning the firm. So that's one thing. I would just say part of it is having a plan, and we'll talk about how to get those junior people to be better. But having that plan and figuring out what are those must-haves, and that third category of maybe there's just no people in the next generation that could take on my firm. When you say that out loud, you kind of realize how ridiculous it is, right? But you could see a lot of evidence of why that is true. And some people just hang on that. Like, there's no way that these younger kids could take over my business. They wouldn't work as hard. They're not as smart, blah, 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 blah. They're not as great with clients. You could come up with 25 excuses. And I would tell you, maybe some of those are true. But when someone all of a sudden has a responsibility of a firm and they have to turn the lights on in the morning and turn them off at the end of the day, something clicks and they change, right? Hopefully. And when they change, they become better business owners, right? If you get thrown into the kitchen, you got to kind of learn how to do it. Otherwise, you're going to fail. So more likely than not, they might not be 100% ready, but if you put them in the right spot, they'll start to think like owners. They'll start to do the right things. A fourth category that might be an issue is the next generation doesn't have the same vision. A lot of times that falls on the owner because they didn't have a vision, didn't have it really well communicated. If they did have a vision, didn't get other people to share that vision. If it's just dictated to them, people might not agree and they might not ever want to be a part of it. So what does that look like? So maybe you do have the right people, but they're just not aligned. How could you get that in place? And some of that is team building things. Some of it is having a strategy. Some of it's bringing in a third party to take those issues of why things aren't meshing or aligning and figuring out what that would look like. And part of it is just letting go. We'll talk about that more in a second. All right, let's say you've now decided you're going to go with the internal successor route. And you maybe have somebody that you want, whether that is someone that you don't know at all or whether someone that's worked with you for a while. It might even be a family member, and there's a whole bunch of dynamics that can go into that. We'll talk about that more in a second. But what could you do to get them to be more successful? And I'll give you a top 10 list. Number one is communicate. I see these things fall apart all the time because the successor doesn't necessarily feel like the owner is going to ever leave, or doesn't feel valued, or doesn't share in any of the decisions, whatever it might be, or there just isn't reminded that they're going to take over the firm. And I've actually seen really good people not have the patience and leave. And so communication is a big part of it, and a little bit of transparency and honesty. Obviously, if you're creating documents and not sharing them, that is a big issue. You should have people looking at that stuff. But you should also kind of be doing some encouraging work, and we'll talk about some other tips in a second, but actually communicating on those things that you agree on and those things that they need to improve, et cetera, and actually kind of being on the same page and let them communicate too. It's not just a one-way street. And listening, a lot of times owners kind of have that know all the answers syndrome. This is my business, I'll run it the way I want, but you're not gonna be around forever. So you really should be taking this feedback. And by taking feedback, it's just not just hearing it, but you actually have to listen and actually make some steps to give them some buy-in and help them advance the organization into the future. Number 2 is have a mentor program. So if your firm's big enough, it doesn't have to be you. If it's smaller, it's gonna have to be you. But where you actually mentor somebody through their career, through their day-to-day responsibilities and everything in between. It can even be personal life things outside of the business. Because there are times where you need to have a work-life balance, and you also need to think about like how to, if you're going to manage a firm, maybe you have to put more hours in, or you got to be more accessible, or whatever those things look like. You got to now start to mentor that person. There's all kinds of things that can come up in a mentor relationship. One of those things might happen within the organization, but you could also get a mentor that has a similar kind of ownership role as you outside of your organization and have them mentor that person. There's a threat potential there that they might try to take that person that they've trained and made better. So sometimes you want to look for a mentor that isn't in the same industry or even an expert in some other way. The interesting thing about mentor relationships is you can have a reverse mentor relationship. I love this. I used to talk about this all the time when I started my consulting business with social media and online communications. Older generation was always the last one to kind of take on new responsibilities, and those younger people that were more tech savvy could help that older generation person figure out some things that would improve the business. But if they just wanted to wipe their hands of it, they were eventually going to be at a disadvantage to the competitors. I will say, and I've said it a whole bunch of times, AI is going to revolutionize everything. So if you have a younger generation within your organization that is tech savvy, that's adopted this stuff, that's using it, that's keeping their finger on the pulse of it all, you're going to want to have a reverse mentorship. You're going to want to start to think about how can that person and help me, the owner, be better at what I do. Better training is number 3, and it goes beyond just the designations and the licenses. Yes, in certain industries, in certain positions, that's what you need, right? Like you can't graduate to the next level until you are prepared, and the industry kind of blesses it, right, with these different designations or licenses. But a lot of times the training has to go beyond that. Think about if you, the founder of your organization, you are learning at a rapid pace, like drinking from the fire hose. How could you help them so they wouldn't have to do that if they took over your organization? Management, ownership, what does that look like? What do you do in your day-to-day? What could they do to take off your plate? They might actually have some creative ideas for you too, related to that reverse mentorship and how to make some improvements. So don't be that the old dog that can't learn any new tricks. So part of the training, when you help them, they might have ideas to make suggestions to make things improved. But what did you learn to run a business? So sales training. Could you take them on the road with you? Could you help them understand how to have a one-on-one meeting with a prospect, how to be better at it? Marketing, we'll just go through kind of all the disciplines of a CEO at a Fortune 500 company, right? So marketing, what could you do there? Client service, how could you improve that? What do you need to do and think about from metrics of success with client service? The number of meetings, the survey data, what are you looking at from your contact management system, CRM, that you want to have other people look at? What documents do you have to look at from an operational efficiency standpoint? Budgeting, finance, all that type of stuff. How is that incorporated? What's your philosophy on it? Like, you can't always have the latest technology. It would be too expensive probably. So what does that look like? How are you going to start to maybe not be at the front line of every new technological advancement? That's not your philosophy. You kind of wait till the kinks get worked out and maybe you're the second round instead of the 10th round of adopting certain things. What does your philosophy look like that? Do you have a philosophy to share? HR, human capital things. Working with people does have headaches. How do you deal with it? What's some of the insights that you have so they don't have to just stumble upon the stuff and totally fall apart. Start to think about what, from a legal and compliance standpoint, all those different kind of silos that would roll up to a Fortune 500 CEO. What does your organization look like, and how could you train within all of those categories? So that would be what I would say is number 3 is better training beyond just what they get in the industry to learn how to do their day-to-day. How do they get some training to help at a higher level if they're going to become an owner? This has been another episode of Business Bests, and this is Mike Byrnes. I'll continue this list in the next episode, but I really want to think about how I can help your business. So if you ever have some ideas, don't be afraid to reach out to me, and you can just search Mike Byrnes, Byrnes, and I'll probably pop up. But I look forward to helping you and creating more episodes in the future. So hopefully these videos have been a lot of help. Thank you.